You're listening to The Money Hour with your host, Tina Mitchell. Sponsored by Absolute Mortgage, a division of Pinnacle Capital Mortgage Corporation. Now, in the studio, local mortgage and finance expert, Tina Mitchell.
Well, welcome back to the Money Hour with your host and mortgage expert, Tina Mitchell, right here on 1150 AM KKNW, the Saturday, April 23rd show. I'm here to empower our community, providing you with opportunities and solutions when it comes to your money. If you're hearing my show at a different time or day, you are listening to a rebroadcast. You can talk with myself or you can talk with the guests that I have in studio. Just call the show number at 1-855-400-1150, 1-855-400-1150, or online at themoneyhour.com. And right now in studio, Susan Larson and Roberta Stennes with RE/MAX Northwest Realtors. Thanks, you guys, for coming in. First time to have a chance to talk with the two of you.
Thank you. It's fun.
Yeah, thank you, Tina.
And a little bit about Roberta and Susan. Susan Larson has been selling real estate since 2003 and works with buyers and sellers. Specifically, she enjoys working with single women as well as investors. And Roberta has been selling real estate since 1995, and I've been May of 1995, Roberta, so 20 years, right?
Yes.
Working with both buyers and sellers with emphasis in condos, first-time home buyers, senior citizen, and luxury homes. So between the two of them, they pretty much have it all covered. Roberta and Susan have been working together as a team for 9 years and find their clients are better served. They're recipients of Seattle Magazine 5-Star Real Estate Agent Award for the past 5 years, which places them in the top 7% of Seattle area realtors. They consistently receive annual awards from RE/MAX for their competency and skills. Their clients' needs are of the utmost importance to them, and their motto is service you deserve from people you trust. And I'm excited to have a full day today about real estate, and we talked with Eric about what's happening over in the south end, a little bit different than what we see here in the King County area. But what are the important steps that you guys are educating your sellers right now when preparing their home to sell?
Well, first of all, to hire an experienced realtor who they feel is competent and someone who would do a comparative market analysis. It's easy to think my home will sell for this huge amount based on what you read and hear, but we really have to look at what's sold in their area so we know where to price it. And pricing it accurately is still important. And we want to clearly educate our sellers. So we provide them with a lot of information, but we also do a market or a seller's analysis with them so we know what their goals are. So what do they want to achieve? And it's still important that your home looks good, that you stage your home. And it takes some work, like addressing the problems that you kind of overlook as you live in a house. Like there might be a hole in the fence or a leaky faucet, and you just let that go. But you still have to do your household repairs, address the odors of cooking or pets or smoking, tidy up the yard. We tell them, go across the street and look at it through the buyer's eyes.
Yes.
Is the yard mowed and trimmed and looks presentable? Sometimes we just get used to things when we live in them, and so we have to look at it differently. Clean inside and out. Susan is sparkle, 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 clean those windows inside and
Love
out.
it.
Yeah. Front door painted, new hardware, doormat out in front. Remove your clutter, and people don't like that it's called clutter, so now we say edit what you have. You're going to be moving anyway, so start packing.
Yeah.
And if you need to enlist a stager, do that. And we have different levels of expertise of stagers that do a small portion or a large portion, or just use the materials that the seller has. Sometimes they need to paint and get things neutral. And then also during showings, get those pets out of there and be gone. And it's important. Lights, camera, action. Open the drapes, turn on the lights, have some music going.
I love it. And I think a lot of sellers, and you said most important is to have an expert, and an expert that's, for many reasons, but two of the key reasons, that somebody that's going to be honest with you about price, and also somebody that takes control of the process to make sure as a seller that you're educated what you need to do, because it's so easy for a seller in this market to feel that they can get a little bit lazier on how their market or how they're preparing their home, when the reality is, yes, your home's going to sell, but the question is the profit that you're going to make on it. So, just asking if they really want to be able to maximize that profit, if that's important to them, then they need to do these things. And the declutter and making it look good, and it's really about what that buyer is going to feel emotionally coming in, and then maybe they're the buyers that are going to be paying the higher price. They're going to be waiving the inspection and doing these things because they really want that home. So connecting on an emotional level. Is that correct?
Right. And their first impression is people are shopping online.
Yes.
And Susan and I hire, as a gift to our sellers, professional photographers. So, we want those pictures to be fabulous.
And that's huge, because if the pictures aren't, and they're just going to delete them, and they may not see that, delete that home and may not see it again. Yeah.
Exactly.
So in this fast market with home selling over the list price, a seller may ask, why bother with the staging?
Well, I was just going to say also on the last question that even though it's a seller's market, we deal with buyers too, and it's amazing how many times buyers will walk away from a house even though there may be only 3 or 4 houses for them to look at because it's not nice enough, or it's not clean, or cleanliness is the most important thing. People can remodel, but nobody wants to move into a filthy house.
Yes.
And staging is really important to get to this question, because if it's a house that's vacant and you walk in and there's nothing in it, it echoes for one thing, and it doesn't feel like home. And I have seen people buy a house because they love the staging.
Yes.
And it makes all the difference in the world. And
because you're connecting with them on an emotional level, right?
Exactly. And our sellers pay for the staging, and even though it may be expensive, if you get really good stagers in there, you're going to make that up threefold in the offers. And it really does make a difference. And especially, it has to be a good stager. It just can't be somebody coming in and throwing a few pillows around, or, put a chair in the corner, which we've seen.
Sure.
And the front door, clean the front door. Drives me crazy when we go into a house and the front door's got paw prints all over it. How hard is it?
Yeah. Well, it's kind of like when you sell a car, you're going to get it detailed to make sure that you have that you've got the best look in the interior when they come in. So same thing and again, it's really about just maximizing that price that the seller is going to get for that property. So what should sellers be aware of in the offer process?
Well, there are so many other items to consider besides price. Of course, price is important, but items that indicate how strong the buyer is financially, like how much money are they putting down? The level of their earnest money indicates how committed they are to the process. And also consider their financing contingency, or as you talked about earlier, is it a cash offer? The inspection contingency, the type of loan, and then we always like to shorten up time frames for our buyers and sellers, and so that inspection gets done in a short time frame, and also the final loan approval, and if there's a title review, but also the closing date. We've seen a lot of rent backs to sellers so they can stay there longer, but they've closed, and so that's done, and then of course the escalation clause.
So anything else that you're seeing that are creative for in the offer process?
Yes, but I would like to also say the loan, who's doing the loan is important.
Yes.
And also who the other agent is important.
And I think that is really, I'm so glad that you brought that in, Susan, because as a consumer, so if you're listening right now as a buyer, please make note of this because it's so important. Reputation is everything in these multiple offers because making sure that offer is going to actually make it through the closing process, because I read a statistic that 30% of mortgages don't close, not close on time. They don't close.
Wow.
And so the reputation of the lender is big, and the other realtor. And why would that be important, Susan? Can you share that with my listeners?
Well, the most important thing in a transaction is that it does close and it closes on time. And if you have a lender that's not local, an online lender or somebody that's lazy,
Yep.
then it's not going to happen.
Yeah. And what about the realtor? I mean, why is it so important that the realtor that's representing the buyer, that you, as if you were on the listing side representing the seller, why is that dynamic so important? Can you share that with my listeners?
Roberta, do you want to take it?
Sure. Well, agent to agent is really important
Yes.
because we're not competing. We are working as a team
Yep.
to get the job done. And we love working with newer agents or experienced agents, but we want them to be committed
Yes.
to doing their part of their load.
And you guys, you know a lot of that when, again, you represent both buyers and sellers. But when you're representing the seller, you're looking at things completely different than if you're representing the buyer. And you know when that offer is going to get presented on whether that realtor has experience or if they're lazy. I mean, you can see that. So it's really important that through that process that all of that is being done at the highest level. And so as a buyer, making sure that you're working with a real estate expert that has a great reputation can make a difference in that offer getting accepted.
Because some things could fall through the cracks, and if you don't have a really good buyer's agent, then the loan could fall through because they're not keeping tabs with that, and we're all following through the transaction through close. And
Exactly.
And if you don't have the communication, then things could go wrong.
Yes, yes. So creative things in offers. Are there anything else that you guys are seeing that you can share for buyers in getting creative when they're putting that offer together?
Well, Roberta mentioned rent backs. That's a good
so
one.
So explain, so and your rent back is like a 60-day.
30 or 60 days,
Yep.
and usually you give them 60 days, and it has to be free. They get to live there in that house until it closed, until they find a place to move to.
Okay.
And oftentimes they do that pretty quickly, and then it's not the 60 days. We've had people, escalation clauses, which means you're going to go a certain amount over the next best offer up to a certain amount. Escalation clauses that are a dual escalation clause where you go a certain amount over the next best offer up to a certain amount if it's a loan, contingent on a loan, or if it's contingent, or if it's not contingent on a loan. If you're competing against cash, you may go $20,000 over the cash offer, but only $2,000 over the loan.
So it can get a little tricky in putting those numbers together.
Yep.
And are you seeing on that note, when we're talking about escalation clauses, because we're starting to see in some strategy on the seller side is coming in with your best, final and best, or what is that? What's the term called? Best and final offer. So they're not allowing the escalation clauses to come in and just having you come in with that best offer right up front.
The problem is they'll say no escalation clauses, and then somebody does use an escalation clause anyway. So typically we use an escalation clause, and then the agent might call us and say, now give us your highest
Now
and
gets
best.
the highest and best. Okay, yeah. And I, just even on the simple things is, for a buyer, just allowing the seller to leave all their junk behind. Just making small extra gestures, covering the insurance, the insurance portion. There's something you can do on that. So think about those small things if you're listening as a buyer, and take some advice from our experts that are saying you really do need to do some creative things to get your offer accepted. So let's talk about describing what happens in a multiple offer scenario.
Well, Susan and I actually chart it out with our sellers.
That is awesome.
So we do the initials, the amount, the loan, the percent down, the earnest money, who's the other agent, who's the lender. I mean, we have a massive chart. And so they can look at it across the board and really do a fine comparison, so they can make a wise decision. And it is their decision; it's not our decision.
And that's a good point, because a seller may think, well, my agent's just going to tell me what the best offer is, but you can't. I mean, they have to make that decision. You've got to have the information and the way to make it easy for them to understand what the offers are, just like you said.
So we guide them through that process. And I think multiple offers sounds so fun and exciting, and it's not. It's hard work, and it's hard on the sellers as well as the buyers.
Well, I would imagine so, because the sellers are emotionally attached to wanting to make sure that they get the best offer. And when you're looking at 10 offers side by side, that could get overwhelming. completely makes sense. So what happens during the inspection period?
Well, if it's a multiple offer situation, then people will do a pre-inspection, which means they'll waive their inspection before they actually write the offer. But if they are lucky enough to be the only offer, then they hire an inspector, and that's usually between $400 to $500, and they'll have the inspector tell them what's wrong with the property, and then they can go back to the seller and ask for a reduction in price, or for the seller to fix a few things, or just say everything's fine, I'll just take it as it is. And we always encourage our clients to not ask for little tiny things, a drippy faucet. It's the big stuff. You're really looking to see if the foundation's okay, or there are rats in the attic, or that sort of thing.
And also I was talking with one of my realtors, and you have to be sensitive in how you're addressing the sellers. If you think there's an issue before you've even made the offer, don't bring that up at that time, because you don't want to make the seller nervous about how you're going to respond moving forward. Is that correct? I mean, do you?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, thanks. So, what about the sewer scopes? Is that common that you guys are seeing that right now?
They are becoming more common. It depends on the age of the home, and it's usually done during that same time frame of the inspection period.
Are you seeing that a pre sewer scopes getting?
Certainly.
Yes. Okay. And so after the inspection process, we actually talked about that. And, if they're not doing a pre-inspection, and we're not in the crazy market, there might be some negotiating. Right now, it's kind of slim to none because of the market that we're in. But what about the appraisal process? And so we talked about inspection, the inspection being, they really being the interior and the details of the property, whereas the appraisal being the value.
Well, if somebody has a loan, then that's when the appraisal happens. If it's all cash, of course, there's no appraisal. So the lender orders the appraisal, and the appraiser goes out, and then they do a report, and hopefully it'll match what the purchase price is. If not, then there's new negotiations. The seller drops the price, the seller gets out of the deal, or they could hire their own appraiser. And now we're seeing people, buyers, saying that they're going to increase the appraisal amount, that if they have extra cash over their down payment, then they'll say, I'll pay up to whatever. Over, if it's a low appraisal, I'll kick in $10,000 or $20,000.
So why are we not seeing yet? And I think it would be a really great idea. Sellers are thinking of doing pre-inspections or doing inspections ahead of listing the home. Why have they not thought of doing an appraisal before they list the home? Not that, appraiser is an opinion of value, but if they can get that opinion of value to support what they're hoping to get for the property, they've got something to show to an appraiser if they did come in low.
Yeah,
Are you guys hearing any conversation about that?
No, I haven't seen anybody do that.
Yeah.
And I wonder if that's because they don't know what they're going to get. The multiple offer situation, it could be $100,000 over what they're listing it at. And if it's just so volatile, I think.
Yeah.
You just don't know. You might get $435 for it, or you might get $535. So
yes.
how can you? And if your appraisal came in at $435, and then you got multiple offers, and it was huge down payment or cash, then good for you.
Yeah. I know, it's just an interesting dynamic with what we have, without a doubt. So title and escrow. Explain a little bit about the title and escrow process for my buyers. Or for my listeners, and for the buyers out there that are listening.
Most people don't realize that title insurance is so different than other insurances. For health insurance example, we buy that for in the future. And title insurance goes back to make sure the property you are buying does not have any liens against it, and that you are buying a property with clean title, with no judgments, no extra fees, and you're buying what you think you're getting. There might be easements or encroachments, but you can know about that, and title can repair things, and so you get the home.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
So it's like you would not have insurance, so you would not have title insurance. To wrap things up here, a seller may be listening and thinking, well, gosh, homes are selling. You guys are talking about the whole show with the lack of inventory, and it's such a great market. Why do I need to hire representation to sell my home? Can you please share why they have to do that? They don't want to sell by themselves.
Most for sale by owners leave money on the table. They just do. They love their homes. They put a price on it. Someone comes in and buys it. they don't have the expertise to get it to close.
Yep.
And it just amazes me that someone would even want to try to do it.
Yes.
It's they don't always have a realistic idea of what their house is worth. And we just know that because of our experience, we ultimately will get them more money for their home.
Makes total sense. And you talked about the multiple offers. If they did have those, how are they going to navigate
what would
through the
they do?
process? And I think a lot of people don't realize that the work starts when you're listing that home, without a doubt. But the work doesn't end until it closed. So you got a whole nother dynamic of work starts that once the contract is that it is under contract, and there's a lot of things that are happening that you've got to have that experienced realtor representing you, or otherwise there's a big risk of things falling apart.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, thanks you guys so much for coming into studio. It was great having you in for the first time. Look forward to having you back.
Thank you.
This is your host, Tina Mitchell, signing off for the day. Thanks, everyone, for joining me, and I look forward to talking with you same time, same place next weekend right here on 1150 AM KKNW.